Can y'all hear and see me?
Yes.
Yes. Can you hear and see me?
Yes.
Cool.
Good to see you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Trey and Crew Show. Got a really
Your sound just cut out, man. Oh no.
exciting guest
Back.
today. We got Samantha Pree Stinson from the Estimate and Tax Board, and we also have Alfredo Trujillo. How you doing, Alfredo?
I'm okay. Thanks for inviting me to the show, you guys.
How you doing, Samantha?
I'm doing well.
Okay, so um, we want to start with Samantha, or
Alfredo, are you can start.
I can start. So, the reason I'm advocating today for homeless people, not just here but around the world, really, and not only just homeless, but the marginalized of this country, and its wicked ways, um, where this country is tantamount to the largest terrorist organization in the world due to corporate monopolies, the healthcare industry, the slavery. Whether you're under slavery, right? Whether you're suffering from slavery from the wage system, or you're suffering from slavery from being incarcerated, and there's so much money being tossed around here and there, so much new construction, and these politicians can't even afford. I mean, obviously they work for the corporations. That's all they care about. They care about getting elected in corporations, and with gerrymandering and voter fraud recently that's affected us, it's not even a legitimate way to get your voice heard, you know? So, I mean, these politicians can't seem to find housing for these people, yet there's $1 million condos that no one can afford because of the shrinking middle class, and they got them begging on the streets for the basic essentials. Ever since Bernie brought up the socialist activism that he's been consistent with for about 40 years, in the spirit of FDR. Like, and that's the thing. Like, the Democratic Party would rather have Trump than Bernie, and that's the problem. Is that even the most left-leaning liberal is right-wing, according to the rest of the world in the political spectrum.
can you talk about the first time you was in the encampment and how that what happened?
Right. So this encampment was at the base of the cathedral in St. Paul, and I was told by little birdie, I'm not going to name names, but that if I stood up to the evictors, that I could possibly get housed that same day. And I
Mm.
told everyone in the camp. There was about 70 tents altogether, and I told everyone. I was very vocal to the rest of the encampment about standing up for themselves. And the thing is, we don't feel it's like it's a sense of empowerment. You know, we're already in abject poverty and slavery. We're
Mm.
like a slave to these systems of checks and balances of medical routine and whatnot. So we're stuck in this endless loop of poverty, which is traumatizing. It really is traumatizing. And what I like to say is that once I got out of the situation of being homeless, it was like a culture shock. Like, it's a whole new way of living. Like, I had a door to close, but it was like, for example, my sister sent me a bunch of stuff, things that you need, knickknacks and all that stuff. But because I wasn't used to carrying so many things, I was like, I suffer from anxiety because of it. And that's the kind of stuff that we need rehabilitation for people on the streets. We need counselors. We need um, more support and more advocacy, really. And the money is there, but these greedy politicians and these greedy corporatists would rather make a buck on doing nothing because they don't do anything all day. What does Elon Musk do all day? Do you think he's really out there writing code and working for this company? No,
Hell
he's
no.
he's doing who knows the hell's what. While everyone else does the real work, these corporate politicians get like kickbacks and bonuses. So
Indeed.
anyway, I was at the encampment, and because of the information that somebody gave me, I was able to get get a hotel voucher that same day. They swept us at 9 o'clock. By 4 o'clock, I was in a hotel for 3 months, and then I got housed.
So right now, you said you're having some problems with housing right now.
Right, right. So there's the way housing works is that if you don't have an income, then you don't have to pay because it's 30% of your income. And I didn't have an income for a while, but then I regained the income. It was Social Security Disability. It was actually RSDI, not SSDI. So it's been paid from my father's retirement account. So it's already been paid for by my dad. So it's not an entitlement, first of all. Even if it was, I would accept it because people need help in these situations, you know? And anyway, long story short, I ended up telling them when because I got my Social Security reinstated, and I told them the same month that I got reinstated, but they wanted everything in writing and on paper. When I didn't have internet access, I didn't have a computer, I didn't have the essential things I needed in order to do this stuff for them on paper, and that's what gets in the way is the bureaucracy most of the time. Like re-upping for food stamps every 6 months, it's ridiculous. It's a waste of time, energy, and effort.
Indeed. Miss Stinson, did you have a couple questions for Alfredo?
Um, not necessarily questions per se, but like you said, this is a global issue.
Right,
And there are you mentioned something that resonated with me around the empowerment piece because it
right.
is really difficult to even feel empowered for 5 minutes, let alone for months,
Yes, it's
when
exhausting.
it's exhausting. And so it's hard to show up for yourself because you just don't have the energy. You're more
Right.
concerned,
Well,
like,
it's
I'm
like
gonna go to the bathroom.
it's a question of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That's like in the realm of self actualization, and we don't even
Hmm.
have the basic things we need in order to survive. How are we going to be
Hmm.
actualized like that? You know?
Right. Has there been any connection or anybody that has offered to the unhoused community to connect you with some unhoused communities that have formed unhoused unions,
No,
and some
no,
things
not at
like
all.
that? So that is
That would be
something,
awesome. That would be amazing. Really.
because I think that's part of the empowerment piece is like,
Right.
we often want to have our own meetings and our own thing, but
Right.
this is a national issue. And so we have to build
It's a
national
global issue.
coalition.
Right.
We got to create these international even coalitions of
Right.
areas where they have been able to form
Right.
cooperatives, where they've been able to form
Grassroots.
unions. And so
Right.
that is powerful to know that that's something that you all haven't been connected to. So
Right.
that's something that I can commit to help connect you to, is
Oh
that
my God! Thank
the
you.
folks that are doing that work already, to get y'all connected so that you can have the
Like
support.
co-opting buildings and stuff like that.
Yep. Like the
Wow.
mothers in Oakland did, right? There's a lot of different places where they've been able to do the things that we're talking about or have tried,
Right.
and lessons learned. There was many reasons why we weren't successful, and I honestly believe that part of the reason why that success hasn't happened is because well-meaning and intentioned people who
Right.
are housed get in the way
Right.
because they
Right.
think that they know
They
better. You
and they
all
don't
have to.
they don't mean to. They don't mean to, but they don't know.
No.
Like you said, they don't know any better.
They don't know, right? They start, like, for example, I asked the other day, like, so what are the demands? I was told a few demands. Well, who created those demands? Was it the
Right.
unhoused? Because if they didn't, I don't want to hear about no demands, because they're
Right.
not their demands.
They're not valid.
They're not valid if they're not coming from the people that are actually in that particular
Right.
struggle. And
Exactly.
so I feel like the place of somebody who's housed, any movement period is not a movement if there's not education. Fred Hampton
Right.
said it,
And
many others have said it.
and
So that
sadly,
empowerment comes
sad.
from giving you those tools and
Right.
information. These are the
Right.
people. This is how to get connected. You don't have a
Right.
phone, cool. Where are you going to be? I'll come with my phone and we'll call
Right.
them.
Right.
Those are the
Right.
things that people that are housed can do to make sure that that's how you feel empowered,
Right.
right? And I
By
think
being
that's where
acknowledged.
being acknowledged, being heard, and being respected,
Right.
that being unhoused doesn't have anything to do with your knowledge level, your
No.
ability to make
I
decisions.
have degrees and certifications.
Of
Wow.
course you do.
Yeah.
And that's one of the misconceptions as well, right? That you all are somehow helpless,
Right.
when that's not the scenario. But people will gatekeep information and be like a middleman for no reason.
Right. Right. Right.
Exactly.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the help. Like that would be immense.
And
Yeah.
Alfredo, I know how to get a hold of you, I'm pretty sure. So I'll make sure
Okay.
to connect with him so that way we can stay connected and I can help give you those resources and tools and make the connection so that you all can be
Okay.
empowered to lead.
Thank you for coming on and sharing your experience with us too, Alfredo. We're gonna keep you coming back too and giving us updates and just being part of these broadcasts.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate you guys spending time with me.
No
Mucho
problem.
cuidado.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And well, yeah, that was Alfredo, and he's downtown Minneapolis, and they're fighting for the unhoused. And there was an encampment. Our brother DJ was arrested at an encampment, I think Saturday.
Mhm.
So we want to bring awareness to that these sweeps are happening here in Minneapolis.
Power to the people.
Power
Yeah,
to the
power to the
people.
people. Thank you, Alfredo.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, guys.
Of
No problem.
course. So
Yeah.
so many things to say. Well, for one, I want to go back to something that we were just talking about with organizing, because organizing, I think a lot of times people confuse activism with organizing, with mobilizing, and they don't necessarily understand the words that they're using. And that a lot of people don't, because of the fact that the education piece isn't happening, they don't understand the tactics and the tools that we use in organizing spaces to build power.
Come on.
And I think there's folks that end up co-opting movements very easily because of that, and they don't recognize that there's different struggles within the struggle, right? Within that movement. And so somebody's station, whatever it is, it could be their identity, it could be whether they have a house or not, whether they're white collar, blue collar, right? There's all these different spaces of people that are oppressed, but no group trumps over another one. And so there's also a lack of respect that can happen, like Alfredo was saying, with
Mm.
this particular group of individuals, where people get confused what even it means to be an allyship with someone. And as we see, there's a lot of people out there, and they're advocating for themselves, and they're building their own power, and they're doing what they feel is necessary out there. And I
Right.
think there's a narrative about blame and who's responsible, and well, you held a press conference, so that means everything that happens is your fault. This isn't about fault. What you're seeing outside of City Hall is those unhoused people on their own. They're our neighbors that have met with each other. They are building, they are sharing information, they are creating a list of demands of things that they feel that they need. They're talking about the barriers that to access, even to social programming, social services. There's barriers to entry
Exactly.
because you don't have your paperwork, or whatever number of things. And so I think that it's important to name that before we talk about other things, that what's happening right now, when he panned that view so we could see what's out there, that isn't what was out there when you and I were out there for that press conference. The unhoused people are taking a stand to say that they're tired of it. You can't keep pushing us around. We go in the bushes to hide. We go under the bridges. They've done everything except what Las Vegas has done, where you have people that are living in the empty, non-used sewer tunnels.
Wow.
The
Man.
people have taken to underground in other places.
Mm.
And so to me, it's not irrational. It is not irresponsible that the people that are directly affected and impacted are deciding that they're going to take a stand, and that they're going to demand that they are housed. The
And
brother was able to get housed, so he's out there because, just like Nadine Little was out there earlier, these are people that have been out there in these encampments that were able to, with the support of people who understand what their role is as an ally and as a responsible organizer, to connect them to the people that they need to, and be that resource and that bridge, so that they can then take the next action for themselves.
exactly.
The
And
next press conference, I don't think any of us should be speaking. We should be bringing our resources like we did today, so that they can line up and they can tell their story. They can share their collective power. They can talk about what they're building and what their expectations are and what their demands are. And that is the goal. And it does appear that that's what's happening tonight. And I would call that a success. They're taking ownership of what is happening to them, and they're speaking up for themselves and not waiting for somebody to speak for them.
Indeed. And I think just also the press conference was also about the unhoused, but one of our activists who were out there supporting the unhoused was arrested for no reason. So we wanted to come out and speak on his behalf because there was an unjust arrest. But definitely we want to see unhoused people or whoever impacted communities. If you're impacted by something, we want that community to come out and speak out and say what their demands are, so nobody else comes in and try to change up the demands for whichever marginalized group is fighting for justice. Whether that's justice, housing justice, social justice, police accountability. We want to make sure
one ecosystem. They're not separate issues. And that's where we, as the people that are in this struggle, need to come in and also take collective responsibility for that, because these are not separate movements. The class movement, racial equity, unhoused, the working class, economic justice, housing justice, home ownership justice, all of these different areas where work is happening, it is one collective. And so often people focus on the things that they don't agree on, and that becomes the distraction instead of focusing on the common thread. We already know what folks don't agree on, but we also know what the common threads are. And so if we're able to step into that power, that's our personal power. We have to understand that is power that we hold, to bring people together and say, we're not going to focus on what we disagree on, because you can go work elsewhere with people that share those values. But for the areas that we have values alignment, we absolutely have got to be on the same page, because it's the same exact system, regardless of what area of work your expertise or your focus is. It's the same exact system that is oppressing us, regardless of the particular category of the oppression.
Indeed. I want to congratulate you for being elected and being seated in 2021. You made history to the Board of Estimate and Taxation. Can you tell us a little bit about how that felt, and then explain to us what that board does? And are you the president now? Okay.
Yeah. So yes, and I want to provide just a little bit of context about how did it even be that I came into the movement in the first place? Because when I grew up in LA, between the best sides of LA, that I call it, South Central and East LA, between both sides of my culture. And what was expected of me in this body from my elders was, you are going to get an education and get out of this hood. You're going to give back to community in every way possible. And my grandmother was right in the middle of South Central off Manchester, Wall and 87th. Shout out to my neighborhood. My grandmother held it down for unhoused people and for women and men who were dealing with addiction and had children, and would actually take them in, and had certifications in that to be able to provide that service. And so, and my father, every holiday, every day off, we were taken down to Skid Row. And we were expected as his children to give back to our community, and understand that at any given point, we could be an addict, we could be unhoused, we could be without a job. And so regardless of what degree or whatever our family was able to obtain for us, that we still had a social responsibility. And we were never any better than anybody else. And that was ingrained in me. And at the same time, kind of juxtaposed also this notion of kind of get the 6-figure job, and that is a success at the same time. And those are kind of two different, very differing mindsets, right? So in 2017, I had done that. I had finished school. I had been working at Medtronic for, I think, 6 years at that point. And I had my own very direct racist experience waiting on the bus on my way home. And it made me question what I was actually contributing to my community. And through that conversation, I decided to invest in myself, to use my retirement to run for office, and I quit. And then my next point that I dealt with was, I don't feel comfortable trying to force myself to fit into a box out of ease. So while some people would argue that the only way you can win is as a Democrat, I proved that as well. Did I win in 2017? No. I didn't have great numbers, but I ran with the Green Party and I believed in that. As you know, I chaired the Green Party. I passed the torch to you when I left. And that my activism continued from there in a variety of different spaces. But it was important for me, like not everything is a government solution. So it's not just being in this particular role of what I do in community, but we do need to be at that table. And I feel I sleep well at night because I'm not beholden to anybody, to any party. I'm beholden to the community members that I went out and did that sweat equity that I continue to do every day, being out in community and talking to the regular everyday person that normally does not get engaged with, right? Normally people engage with folks that got the money. They've got some other resource that is valuable to you. But to me, community and word of mouth within community and showing up in real and authentic ways is the way to win. If I have to win being somebody that I'm not, then I don't want to win.
Come on.
So this win was historic in a lot of different ways because this time I didn't even run with the party. I was in solidarity with the Greens. The Socialist Party USA supported me as well, but I was transparent with them to say, I want you to show up for me in allyship. I don't want to even be beholden to any group or party, because the only way for me to stay on the straight and narrow is to keep the people in mind and not be worried about getting a call from some political chair somewhere telling me that what I'm saying and what I'm doing doesn't mix with their agenda. It's the people's agenda or no agenda. And so I feel very empowered even by that, because I don't have to worry about that. And that's not a diss to people that choose to build politically that way. That's just not the way that is authentic to me. And that's just not where my heart and my passion is. My passion is always in the streets with the people that are suffering the most. And so in this role, it doesn't write policy, but it focuses on two very important things, which is bonding, which is basically loans from the state that we get for public infrastructure projects. That could be a stadium, a convention center. It could be something else too. It could be road improvements. It could be Upper Harbor Terminal. Lots of different types of projects that we do that type of bonding for. And then also setting the maximum property tax levy. And then there's a couple of different subcategories as well. Some retirement funds. The funding for MPRB comes through that process as well, which is our Parks Board in Minneapolis. Public housing, which is something I know we're going to get to. But so it's a small role, but it's not really a small role. It's a different focus. And it is very unique to Minneapolis. I believe that we are one of the few places, if not the only place, that still has this independent seat. There are 2 elected seats on that board to sit with the other elected people that are council members and the mayor. So you have 2 people from community that have no other focus, but they represent the entire city on these financials. And we have independent oversight to be able to ask questions, have access to information and data, and to be able to be that true representative of the people.
Indeed. Talking about, wow, that's powerful and exciting. And what you said about political parties, I think, is the wave of the future. I don't know if we're there yet, but I think more and more we're going to start seeing people, be people candidates instead of party candidates. So hats off to you on that. Talking about raising the levy. For those who don't know, could you explain what that means and how that relates to the public housing piece we were about to go into?
Yeah. So let me start by saying, again, another divide that happens, right, is between renters and landlords. Well, the landlord is only able to pay the mortgage because he has somebody, he, she, or they have somebody to rent to.
Right.
So they're in the same, if the scales are unbalanced and a large cost comes to, corporate landlords, that's a different story. Private equity landlords, different story. But for the neighborhood mom and pop person that has a duplex or just one house, that cost gets passed on to somebody, and that somebody is the renter, right? And we don't have rent stabilization in Minneapolis yet, which is a whole nother conversation. But so the property tax levy is, we set the maximum amount that the council has to work with. So once the mayor proposes his budget, he proposes a percentage of levy, which equates to a dollar amount. How much of our public budget comes from property taxes?
Okay.
And that includes commercial properties. And so then once we make that vote on what that percentage is, we either vote in favor of the mayor's proposal or we do something else. Once that happens, then it moves to the council. And it doesn't mean they have to use all that money. They can actually choose to use less, but they have a max that they cannot go above. Once we set the max, they can't go above it, but they can go below it. So when they start, you start hearing the word markup, that means that they each go through the mayor's budget and they start making recommendations and changes based on what they think. So ultimately, what ends up being voted on in the end is what we touched in setting the maximum. The council then focuses on the policy and the allocation of those dollars.
Okay.
And then the ultimate vote at the end is what ends up being that budget. So it starts with the mayor, it goes to the Board of Estimate Taxation, and then it ends with the council. And there are points in the timeline here where the charter requires that there's mandatory public hearings that have to occur so that the public can show up and weigh in.
Right.
Are they effective? Do they listen to us? My personal experience is yes and no, right? It depends on the person. But from being a previous staffer at City Hall to previous council member Cunningham, a lot of those deals and conversations and what they're going to do happen way before the public hearing happens. And by the time the public hearing happens, people have pretty much made up their mind and have put that work in. And so I really do think that we need to work on getting public comment and feedback to City Hall much earlier in the process.
Okay.
Because by October, in fact, there's in November 11th, I believe is the first one. They're voting in December.
Right.
And they've had this budget already since August. So to me, the public hearings they're not high up enough in the process that feedback actually ends up being used or is able to be applied because they're too far down the process to make that level of changes. And so that is something that I think is something that I need to take up on my agenda about when these public hearings happen. And it doesn't mean that they have to be chartered. There's nothing stopping me from saying we're going to have a community engagement plan that starts in January, and every 2 months we're going to have a meeting and collect this feedback and put it into the public record and send it to folks so they have it in time.
That's
and I think that's the move. So that's part of my work now is building that engagement plan. I plan to build that with community and have a meeting before the end of the year so that we can shape what it is that we want to get in front of them. When do we think it should get there? How are we engaging with people? Who's involved in that process? And make sure that it is as public, that it is as cooperative and grassroots as possible.
Indeed. So earlier today, you were talking about public housing and the levy. Can you talk about what you're trying to get done with that?
Yes. So the Minneapolis Board of Estimate and Taxation cannot create new levies. That is something that I'm working with some state partners to determine what are the steps that they have to take to allow for us to create a new levy, because I do think a reparations levy is warranted.
Yes.
And there are some things that locally we should be responsible for moving in that way. But in the case of the public housing levy, that levy already exists. So I don't have to do that. I don't have to do that work, but it needs to get funded. For the last 6 years, that levy has not been funded. There are roughly, depends on who you ask, but there are close to 10,000 people on that wait list. And last week, I actually read on Facebook a very heart-wrenching post from a woman whose adult son had committed suicide. And after he died, she got the letter in the mail with his name on it that he had finally got approved for public housing. And that was part of his depression, not being able to have his own home. And constantly facing barrier after barrier after barrier, and the mental health burden that puts on someone. And so, those things really, that humanizes the issue. It was already humanized for me, but when people send me things like that and they reach out to me, it drives me all the more to keep pushing. and push in the right places. So Mayor Fry did give $2.7 million because if there's take enforcement, for example, we know that they got more money than they could spend in Minneapolis the last 2 years. So what happens, and this is true of any department, when there's money that they can't spend or didn't spend, it kind of goes into this pot that can be really reallocated to other needs. So $2.7 million is being given as a one-time line item. It's not a recurring thing for now. And he did state that he is at the table and wants to fund that levy. And so for next year, this should be something that's right dead center in the conversation to talk about how much. Director Warsami at MPHA says he wants it funded. I've spoken to him several times. And so the table is being set that we should fund this, and it needs to be regular and it needs to be every year because we have a lot of time to make up for. And unless they start building affordable housing that's only for the 30% area median income or lower, which is basically the poverty line, there are no affordable housing solutions for those folks on fixed incomes or that their income is just below that 30%. You have to fund public housing, and I do think it's relevant to the unhoused issue because you're going to end up unhoused when you cannot afford to live anywhere. And while there may be suburbs and rural areas that are more affordable, folks don't have transportation. The jobs don't pay as much out there. And so people need to live closer to where they work. And it's also important for safety, right? Because economic justice is safety as well. You have to be part of your neighborhood to build it up. And if you're just coming in and out every day, you're unable to build with your neighbors and to build those relationships and be an active participating member in your community in the ways that matter and that are important. And so it is a matter of safety when somebody doesn't have that security for themselves. It is a matter of safety for them. Even if it's economic safety, that's still a form of safety, right? If you can't eat, if you don't have a place to lay your head, how are you supposed to get ready for work, right? It feeds into all these things. And so without having those access to public housing, people that fall within that category don't have any other options. They end up getting evicted. Now they have a record and they can't rent someplace again if they wanted to, right? And so now their only option is the charity of others if they're lucky, or they're out on the street.
Exactly. Yeah.
So by not having that functioning and putting in that work to finance it and also resource it, the gap is going to continue to get bigger. And there is a point where the gap is so big that it's almost impossible to solve.
For real. And that's exactly why we're talking about closing the racial wealth gap or putting a chunk in it by 2030. So when earlier today, and we're talking about these, like just kind of piggybacking off what you were saying with the gaps, you said we're placing the blame just strictly on the city, but we're not looking at the county. What is Hennepin County's responsibility with the unhoused in the encampment and just affordable housing, period?
Very good question. And so I'll start with the analogy of, right, you got to have the right people doing the right work at the right time in the right place. And when you have people that are forced to start doing work in an area that isn't their expertise, we can't expect for there to be a good outcome. Cities were not built to hold social services. So social services, when you go and apply for SNAP or, also people call it EBT, food stamps, whatever you want to call it, any social services programs that you get is a Hennepin County function. Think about the letters you get in the mail, got that little blue H in the corner. Those services are from the county. Right. So when the city is forced to try and hire their own social workers, and the city government structure was never created for that. Could we build it? Yes. The time that it would take to do it right, to do it with intention so that it has the outcomes that we want, it's a commitment and we can make it. But there's another party that's responsible, that actually is directly responsible, and they have the money. They have had a surplus for years. And with the ARPA dollars that came in from the COVID, so that's basically the COVID relief money that came from the federal government, They're sitting on a surplus. How can any level of government, to include our state, because they're guilty of it too, the city doesn't have a surplus, but the county and the state does. And so they are the ones that are directly in charge and responsible of those services. So they should be the ones that are doing this. When you call Shelter Connect, Hennepin County Shelter Connect, you're not connecting to 311 at the city of Minneapolis, you're connecting to the county. So why are they telling people to call Shelter Connect, but when you call, there's one bed or no beds? There was one bed last night for a woman, and there was one bed earlier today also for a woman. Men, especially Black men and men of color, but especially Black men, do not have options. And then they're criminalized for it. Take the brothers that just got booted out from the Build Better Futures, right? They were paying a deposit and rent. And so that's a whole nother issue of another eviction that happened this week. And how is it that they don't have to be given proper notice? How can they have to vacate immediately? How is sometimes how is it somehow now that the same laws that apply across the board somehow don't apply to this situation? Is it because they're formerly incarcerated? Is it because something's going on with that group and their financials? We don't know. But the reality is that this is now another group of folks that rely on that type of programming. And by the way, they were also employed by that organization. So not only did they just lose their housing, but they lost their money. And depending on what they were formerly incarcerated for, we know that there's certain programs and services that they do not qualify for because of the type of charge that they have. So this is a huge problem, and the onus relies on them. And this is why when like I mentioned earlier today too, when I worked with others to do that, the hunger strike, and did the sit-in on Commissioner Green's house, simply just so that the unhoused women could get a meeting and release the check. That's what we kept saying. That was why that was the target. So it ties back to organizing, and that you are ineffective in your organizing if you don't educate yourself to understand where the money is, who's responsible at the various levels, so that when you show up at a meeting or request a meeting, that you're going to the source of who's the lock, or who's the key to that lock, depending on how you want to look at it. So it is wildly important that I'm not saying that we stop the stuff that the city is doing. There's still an accountability level there. For enforcement is never going to be the answer to anybody that is unhoused.
Right.
We're just trying to survive. So to have an enforcement response where they are violent, because there is trauma that happens, because these are folks that have been evicted from the outside from multiple locations for several years. And so there is responsibility at the city level for the programming that they do have and the way that they're going about dealing with the issue. But they can only do so much, and that's where the issue lies, is that they're trying to do things that we don't have the infrastructure to do at the local level. And all these people are getting away with it. They're not getting their county meetings shut down. Nobody's mentioning those folks' names, and they need to start mentioning those names. We have people that have ran as progressive, that have been making progressive decisions, that are not too unlike myself. But like I said earlier, I still have to be held accountable as well. And if people don't, if I'm not pushing in the right ways and I'm not doing the job people sent me to do, they have every right to be critical and say whatever they need to say to me, or ask whatever it is that they're asking of me. So even the progressive folks, y'all have to start getting more vocal, and not just when it's an election year.
Right.
This has to happen every single time. So Jeffrey London, District 1, Irene Fernando, District 2, Marion Green, who's the president of the Hennepin County Commissioners. She needs to be held accountable. Angela Connolly, Debbie Goitel, Chris Latondras, Kevin Anderson. Those are the 7 people that represent Hennepin County. And they need to start answering for why they're withholding these funds. What are they doing to increase their capacity to meet the demands of the community? Because the gap is growing because of their inaction. We really don't need to be investing in more temporary strategies. We need to be investing heavily in permanent strategies, because if we do that, we don't have to build more shelters.
Come on.
We don't have to build temporary tiny homes. We can go directly to housing first policy that puts people directly into housing and gets them off of the street so that they have a place to get mail, they have a place to receive phone calls, they have a place to use a computer and send faxes, and start getting their taking care of themselves mentally, physically, and spiritually, so that when the housing comes up and the job opportunity comes up, they're prepared to step into their power and take their power back from the system that failed them. If we're going to keep investing in band-aids and just building more shelters, we are accepting that some people just shouldn't have and should be without, and the temporary is good enough. And so to me, it's a more wise decision to heavily invest in the permanent solutions and start getting on these people that have vacant properties that are sitting on them because of gentrification and waiting for the payout. Because I mentioned earlier, commercial properties are part of taxes. Commercial properties right now, the reason why homeowners are having to bear so much of the brunt is because commercial property values are down. Why are they down? The value of commercial properties, a big percentage of the formula for that is their vacancy rate. So if they don't have business in there, they've been closed down for years. We know the gas stations and liquor stores been sitting empty forever and a day. We know they're holding on to those properties waiting for a payday. And because they're doing that and their properties are blighted, they're not upkept. There's people that are involved in criminal activity that are using those spaces that are not lit, that don't have a presence. They are actively contributing to why we're bearing the brunt as a taxpayers. Even if you're a renter, you're still a taxpayer. That's why we're bearing the brunt. And so there's accountability that needs to be had there. And there is policy that can be created to force their hand to either do something about it or get off the property, because that's what we tell the mom and pop store. So if you can't afford to be in business, you're not in business. Why is it different when you own 2, 3, 4 properties? If you can't be a responsible property owner, too bad for you. Sell your properties and get up off of them.
Right.
Or we're going to eminent domain and take them from you and do what needs to be done with them. That can be done, but there has to be a political will to do it. And so far, there has not been the political will to do it and to be unafraid to get litigious.
Absolutely. What's on the radar that you want the community to know about? Like, what are the things that are coming up that you see coming up that community needs to engage in?
I definitely would recommend, and there always has been good turnout, but I definitely recommend that folks show up if you're in Minneapolis, but even in St. Paul, there's charter requirements for these public hearings around budget. But because the current crisis that's getting the airwaves is Minneapolis, folks need to show up to those public hearings, and they need to show up in volume. The meeting has to go on until the last person speaks, and there's usually 400, 500, 600 plus people that sign up to speak, and those meetings can go till 2, 3 in the morning. And so folks need to mark their calendars. I'm pulling it up now as we're talking about when those dates are so that they make sure they show up. And in the event that you can't show up, practice daily activism. It could be as simple as a phone call every day, an email every day. If you could have a reason you can't show up, you're working, you have an ability issue. There is always a way for your voice to be heard. And I like written communications because anybody can say what happened on a phone call, but an email can't be disputed. So put it in writing so that it's part of the public record. And anybody that denies that you sent a communication or said they didn't know, we can do data requests as the public, which is something else that I recommend. So when there's a trust issue, and people are saying that they did certain things, you can do a data request because they work for us. I work for you. So every email, every phone call, every move I make is your business. And you have a right to have that information. And so submitting data requests is also an important part of accountability, because there's a lot of people saying things, but the actions don't match. And there's a reason for why there's a mistrust in community. And as elected people and just as community leaders, we have to own that as well. We have to make good on what we say, because these communities have been failed way too many times, and they just can't take any more trauma of somebody coming in wearing the suit and saying the good thing, but not following it up with action that we can see and feel. And at the local level, it's the most powerful place to make policy because we feel it immediately. It's not like the feds where it trickles down, or the state. At the local level, when you make a decision, everybody feels that relief immediately as soon as it goes into effect. And so I feel like local politics, that's why local politics is my passion. I think you can get more done in a grassroots manner, that's less about the political party view of things and just more about the human to human connection and interaction. And you can focus on that at the local level.
I agree with you 100%. Most of those races are nonpartisan, like municipal, and then commissioner races too are nonpartisan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
but a lot of times they still run with the party and it's allowed to be on the ballot. And so there's a discussion to be had around that. Like if it's nonpartisan, it should be nonpartisan. But yet the designation of the letter is still there. And so it skews public opinion in many ways. Like that's real. So these public hearings, November 10th is the first one at 10 a.m. November 15th, there's another one at 6:05 p.m. So for folks who, they're at work and can't get there in the morning, they have an opportunity at night on the 15th. And so those are the two public hearings that folks should prepare for, is November 10th at 10 and November 15th at 6 p.m. for the city of Minneapolis. And even if you don't live in Minneapolis, if you own a business in Minneapolis, if you do community work, if you have loved ones that lived here, you have every right to speak too, because the decisions that we make here affect not just the residents that live here. It affects people that come here to work or send their children to school here. So don't just limit yourself as thinking as community as being only the folks who live within Minneapolis. There is absolutely space for other people because there's other activities and things that people show up for. And so they still, not in the same ways, but they are still affected by the decisions or lack of decisions that are being made in their interest.
Absolutely. I come over there and just walk the lake sometimes, get some of that good exercise, and encourage Black people to use the parks that we have here in the Twin Cities. It's very, a lot of cities don't have that type of setup or infrastructure, that type of nature woven into their city like that. If people want to get in touch with you, can you give us your website and all the good information on how people can contact you?
I think the easiest way than spelling it out, because I have a long last name, is if you hate to be that person, but if you Google me, my name in the city of Minneapolis, it'll take you to the page where I'm listed. It'll take you directly to my email, and all of my contact information is there. There's also a form that you can use as well to contact me. I'll actually put in the comments, and then maybe when you share the video, it'll just be up.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put two emails in there, because if it's something related directly to government things, it's best to contact me through that channel, so it's on the record and I can track it. If it's unrelated to that, because as I mentioned, I wear many hats. So if you're trying to work with renter things, I'm a housing organizer on the north side. And so that's why I'm in the streets as much as I am, because that's what I do for my day work. And on the Unhoused side of things, started a nonprofit. We got our nonprofit status. And so we're getting that work off the ground to build that up, to provide cooperative. The ultimate goal is cooperative housing for the unhoused, and to take our organization, flip it into a cooperative and give it back to the community. That's the ultimate goal. But in the meantime, we're going to start with services and providing direct financial support to the people that are in need, so that they can get their deposits paid. They can get some sustaining months where, we pay a little part of the rent, and can connect them to the resources. Like I was telling our brother that was on, I can connect you to those people. And so we're going to start out with resources, but then we're going to move to the ultimate goal, which is this cooperative where everything is on site. Everybody collectively owns it, cares for it, and nurtures it, and they can't take it from you because it's yours. Yes. And so if you want to get in touch with me about cooperative work, or about, just housing things in general, I'm putting my personal email in there as well. You can contact me there. And then once we connect, we can set up a time to meet. To focus on solutions-based organizing, so that we can mobilize and do work. It don't make no sense to show up hollering. It don't make no sense to show up screaming at the wrong folks. At some point, we have to realize our own power individually and collectively and understand that there's transactional work in organizing that is still important, so long as you're able to name that it's transactional, because it's part of getting to transformational. And
Right.
if you're a true organizer, you understand those principles and why they're important. And so it's not a waste of time, because you can choose to ignore politics, but the things are going to continue to happen until you fight for that change, while also building sustainable community-led independent work. But it's going to take both. And until people get there and understand that and start understanding the importance of that coalition, we're going to continue to end up in this vicious cycle. And we have to, at some point, we got to get off the hamster wheel. And the time has always been now, but it really, for real, is now. On every tip and every front, no matter what you're organizing around, the time is now to step into coalition and to focus on the things where we have alignment and leave the rest out.
Right. Indeed. I want to try to have you back once a month. So
I would love to.
Reaching back out early November to get you back out here. So thank you for coming and blessing the Trey and Crew Show with all that knowledge and wisdom and in activism and organizing that you just blessed us with here on the show, but actually earlier today in the streets. You know, we stay in the streets. We're going to stay in the streets. And
that's where it's happening.
Because that's where it's happening. So thank you for coming on. I will be in touch real soon.
Thank you, brother, for always having my back and for your support. It means everything. I cannot do this work alone. It takes all of us, and I'm just one person doing my part of a larger ecosystem and coalition of people that believe this, and that's their values and their principles. So I so much love and respect to you, my brother, for always allowing me to have a platform and to make sure that I'm heard and that my voice isn't suppressed. So thank you so much, and I will definitely see you in November.
No doubt. Love.
Power to the people, my brother.
Peace.
Peace, brother. Thank you.
No doubt. And that was Samantha Pree Stinson. She just got elected to the board of tax and estimation. We heard from Alfredo earlier. He was out at the event. Shout out to my brother DJ. He's an activist. He had got arrested. He went out to the encampment to try to fight for the unhoused, and he got arrested. So we showed up to make sure that he was released, but we had to come down there today and speak out about the injustice that happened to him in the unhoused. I want to thank you all for tuning into another edition of the Trey and Crew Show. This show will be rebroadcasted on www.blacktvs.com or Black Watch Television on your Roku channel. Have a prosperous week. All right. Peace.